What kind of reel should you get? It's a daunting task. All right, let me make this simple. First question we're going to ask ourselves, where are we going fishing? What are we going fishing for? If it's a high stake species, like saltwater fish, steelhead, salmon, big giant trophy trout on light line, then you might want to invest a little bit more in a reel and get the right drag system and a reel that's going to be there for you when you need it in some faraway place that you made an investment to get to. Now, let's say you're fishing out at your local river like this, or you're creek fishing, or you're fishing for trout, and it's kind of a low stakes species. That's where we just want something that's going to be reliable, it's going to be fun to fish, and you're going to be able to count on it. But you don't need to spend $1 bazillion to do that. I'm going to sort all this stuff out for you and help you make a good choice on choosing the right trout reel for the job. So the first topic we're going to talk about is just going to be drag systems and understanding drag systems. Now, for the most part, there's way too much marketing emphasis put on drag systems. Every reel description you read touts the fact that it's got enough drag to stop a Mack truck. Well, who cares? Most of the trout I'm catching out here are about this long. They rarely test my drag system. What does test my drag system is me. I am going to abuse it, I'm going to use it, I'm going to wear it out, and I'm occasionally going to do things that cause me distress. And one of which I'm going to talk about is a drag system's ability to not backlash, okay? So what happens a lot on less expensive drag systems is, one, I get it set to just right where I want it like this, and then maybe I reel in or I fish a little bit and some things change and that drag just decides for whatever reason it's going to loosen up on me, okay? And I go to give the reel a big yank, and all of a sudden I've got a bird's nest like that. In my experience, I'm going to deal with that later. In my experience, less expensive drag settings will tend to wander a little bit and are a little bit more difficult on that light setting not to backlash, okay? Plain and simple. I had that reel loosened all the way up for dramatical purposes. So when it comes to trout fishing, a good drag system is important, but it's not the end all. There are many other attributes that you want to look for. I'm going to talk a little bit about a click pawl. We're going to go to the other end of the spectrum. So drag systems are either going to be a disc drag or a tripod drag system. Typically, Lamson Reels have been making that same tripod disc drag system for eternity, and it is fantastic. But on the other end of the spectrum is just this $100 click pawl reel. It's noisy, makes a nice sound, and I can't backlash this thing. I left my click pawl reel at home today, so I don't have one with a line on it. I had to grab this out of the store. But the cool thing about a click pawl reel that you should know is when I go to yank it, it doesn't backlash. It can be a very light drag system. It never wanders. It never changes settings. It doesn't ever have this evil spirit that tightens my drag a little bit when I don't want it to, or loosens it a little bit and causes a backlash like that one when I don't want it to. So a click pawl drag system for trout fishing in a low stakes environment is a pretty good choice. Very reliable reels. There's two that I really like. One is the Sage click reel, and then the other is the Redington Zero at a little bit more affordable price point like this. But I have a Sage click and love it for most of my trout fishing. So drag systems matter little when it comes to trout. Where they do matter a great deal is in high stakes situations for either large trophy fish where I need stopping power, or fish that are large that I'm going to fight on light tippet like a bonefish or a permit in saltwater, or trout maybe on light tippet on the Missouri River or even the Yakima River if I'm hooking large fish on 5 or 6X tippet. Okay, let's talk a little bit about arbor size and what arbor size means and what you should consider here. Generally speaking, saltwater oriented reels are going to be more of a mid-arbor design like this to maximize backing capacity when I'm out in the ocean. Maybe I'm fishing for Chinook or steelhead or something that can take out a lot of backing. I would consider a mid-arbor reel for those situations. Most trout, I need 75 yards of backing. That's going to be adequate, 100 tops, okay? And I want my reel set up right where that arbor is filled up right there to maximize the gear ratio so that when I reel in, I'm getting a good gear ratio on my retrieve like this. Inversely, I'm going to show you a 15-year-old Ross Evolution, which I love. This reel has been awesome. I love Ross reels, built in the U.S., great product. This reel's been beat up, and I threw a Euro nymphing line on here the other day just because I needed a place to put it, and you can see that is not filled up at all, and I have a horrible gear ratio there. I'm going to have to reel in about 2 or 3 times to this one just to retrieve my lineup. So when you set up a reel, we want to make sure that we set it up right. These super large Arbor reels, like a lot of these Lamsons, a Lamson Speedster is great, a Lamson Lightspeed is another great reel. These large Arbor reels allow you to throw 100 yards of backing on there, get them set up right, fill that Arbor, maximize gear ratio. The other thing about a large Arbor reel is when this line is taken out off of a large Arbor reel, it's actually spinning slower. So that's one thing that's really nice about these, is when a fish accelerates on a large Arbor reel, the Arbor itself is turning slower, and it gives me a much better ability to reach down and maybe put a little friction on a running fish with my finger, like so. If the reel is going 100 miles an hour like this, I'm going to make mistakes, and my fingers are going to get possessive and greedy, and I'm much more likely to break a fish off when it's running on light line. A click pawl reel, that's essentially your drag mechanism, is you get to take the fight into your own hands, so to speak, and you can apply pressure to the rim of a click pawl reel when a fish is running. Again, click pawl reels are great for low stakes trout fishing because they're very reliable. The drag is always set at the same rate. One other comment I'm going to make here is if you're looking at getting a reel for a two-handed rod, I can't emphasize enough getting a reel with a full frame design like this right here, where my line is contained right in there so that thin running line cannot get caught between the reel and a spool. And this is a traditional reel frame here where it is not enclosed like that. That's more of a traditional design, but for two-handed fishing, we tend to recommend people get a full frame design reel if that's something that you're looking to do. Okay, outside of drag systems, another consideration, drag systems in Arbor, another consideration is, and this we're gonna roll kind of right into cost, and that is the materials that the reel is built with. That has a profound impact on the longevity of the reel. So I will admit to you, you don't need to spend 500 bucks on a reel to get a reel that's gonna work for you and satisfy all of your needs. However, the more you spend, the more reliable that reel is gonna be for the long term. Look at this reel. It's 15 years old and it still works great. It absolutely is still smooth, spins good, drag works great. I need to set up the fly line a little bit differently and add some backing to that, but all in all, a great reel. The materials a reel is built with work like this. Cast reels like this right here are typically going to be less expensive. They can be poured, and the casting anymore has gotten pretty good. Cast reels used to be just god-awful, and the tolerances were wobbly and sloppy and really bad. They still are to a degree. We see far more defective reels that are cast when we get product returns than machine reels. A finely machined reel like this Lamson right here, we see almost zero product failure on those right there. And a big part of that reason is the tolerances, whether it's machined from a block of aluminum and every little part is cut out, or if it's the body of it can be cold forged, where it's basically hammered to shape. Those are great reels as well. Whether it's machined or cold forged, that is going to be a much stronger, tougher, and more durable alloy, and it is going to be built to much tighter tolerances than a cast reel. So I can't tell you enough how important it is to just look at the small incremental investment that's required to get into a machined or a forged reel than a cast reel, okay? And where that becomes apparent is when a reel gets dropped, and I dropped one walking across the parking lot on the way over, it is really important that you use these, people. Use your reel boots. Don't let your reels get beat up. When you drop a reel and it lands, especially on the spool, it will bend that spool and it will change the relationship between the reel and the spool. It starts to grind, it starts to sound a little funny. Some of you are watching, know what I'm talking about. That reel just starts working and sounding a little funny, and then eventually you start to wear out parts on the inside. So machined reels are going to be much more durable. If they get nicked and dinged and banged around the boat or the river a little bit, they're going to be much more likely to last than a cast reel. The other thing I'll add in addition is when you spend, the more you spend, like this Tibor for instance, every little screw that's in this reel is built by the Tibor Reel Company. Every part. They're not going to use a cheap screw. This reel, on the other hand, I can't say the same thing about. I'm not sure exactly what they're putting into there, but if you've ever had a reel handle break off, or you've ever had something that was built typically overseas and you've had screws fall out or quality control issues with those little parts, that's an issue. US built reels are typically going to be much better on the components end of things. Every little part that goes into it, from a rubber O-ring that seals your drag system to a piece of Teflon to the smallest screw, all of that stuff is going to be better, and you're going to get much more out of your investment because all of the small parts are there. One note real quickly on balance and size of reels. Most reels are sized, say, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever it is. Generally, I like to buy reels that are on the bigger end of things, because most of these reels, you can see how much is cut out of most of these reels anymore. They're very light, and you can get yourself a retrieve advantage by getting a little bit bigger reel. And the other thing to consider is there's balance, and balance really needs to be considered in two forms. One is the balance of the reel on your rod. If I were holding a rod right now, does it balance? Is the reel heavy and gonna tip back, or is it gonna be too light and I'm gonna be holding the tip of the rod up all day? That's one consideration. The other consideration is the counterweight of the reel acts a bit as a lever when I'm casting. So I do want to have a reel that is going to provide enough weight to help give me a mechanical advantage in loading that rod and keeping that casting stroke nice and stable and anchored. So while light reels are nice, you can use the advantage of a light reel a lot of times to go up in size a little bit, gain yourself a gear ratio advantage. The Arbor spins slower and smoother on a running fish, and you get that good balance to make a crisp, clear cast. So hopefully that answers all or most of your questions. Regarding overall spend on a reel, if somebody has an investment to make and you're trying to figure out what rod and what reel to buy and how to put all this together, generally look like long-term to spend about half the amount of money on the reel as you do the rod. If you're going to buy a $500 rod, look for a reel that's about $250, okay? And that's a great way to balance your investment. You don't want to put a $100 reel on a $1,000 rod, because the rod's going to outplay and outlast the reel. Inversely, let's not put a $500 reel on a $200 rod. If you have $1,000 to spend $600 on the rod, $300 on the reel, and the rest on the line, and you'll have a really well-balanced assortment, and you will have spent your money wisely. If you've got $300 to spend, 200 on the rod, 100 on the reel, and save up for a line, I guess. But I think you understand the relationship there. Try to spend your money wisely. Put a little bit more money into the rod than you do the reel, but don't skimp, because you'll regret it. You'll come back later looking for one of these at some point. So hopefully you found this healthy. Links to all this stuff in the product or the video description below.